If you don't like the way you feel that much, well, maybe you should go and heal yourself.
Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of How to Heal Yourself. In today's episode, we will be discussing the treatment of patellar tendinopathy, also known as jumper's knee. First, let's start with the anatomy. Tendons attach muscles to bone, and they're a part of the contractile component. Anytime a muscle shortens or contracts, strain will be placed on the tendon. It's common for anyone who's dealing with tendinopathy to be irritated by higher levels of loading or higher forces, higher velocities of contraction of the muscle and tendon, or increased frequency of contraction of the muscle and tendon. If you are dealing with patellar tendinitis, you likely have pain in the patellar tendon. It most commonly occurs at the base of the patella or at the insertion on the tibial tuberosity, because tendons are weakest at their attachment points onto the bone. The patellar tendon is a part of the contractile unit that is composed of the quadriceps tendon and the quadriceps muscles. The quad muscles include the rectus femoris, the vastus medialis, the vastus lateralis, and the vastus intermedius. These muscles act to extend the knee. If these muscles aren't strong, there's a good chance the patellar tendon will be the one picking up the slack and feeling the brunt of the force. And that could lead to disorganized collagen fibers in the tendon, which could then lead to weakness, which could then lead to pain when the tendon is loaded. To fix this, we need to strengthen the contractile components, meaning the tendon itself and the quad muscles that attach into it, in order to withstand the forces placed on the tendon. So this injury is something I battled with for a long time after initially developing it during my first year of undergrad at Iowa State. I'm right-handed and I play basketball. And as a right-handed basketball player, I primarily was a one-footed jumper, and I would jump off my left foot most of the time. So my left leg over time developed to be a lot stronger than my right leg. And when I increased my basketball playing volume, my left leg could handle it, but my right leg couldn't. And over the course of that year, I started having right knee pain. And like all my aches and pains, I kind of figured it would go away, so I just kept playing. And that just made it worse. So then I was like, all right, I'll take some time off. So I took about 2 weeks off, and I started playing again, and it hurt even more after that. So then I decided, well, let me go to the doctor and see what he thinks. The doctor said he thought it was patellar tendinitis, which was my hypothesis. And he told me to do leg extensions on the machine in the gym. He didn't tell me how many to do, how much weight to do, how intense it should be. So I just kind of freestyled, and so I listened to him. I did the leg extensions, and my knee started hurting even more afterwards. Over time, it became a chronic pain that I thought I had to live with, until about 5 years later, when I was in my second year of PT school, COVID hit, and I thought to myself, well, all the gyms are closed and my normal form of exercise is kind of taken away. So why don't I try to fix this problem? So I gave myself 4 months of strict rehab where I'd be performing consistent resistance training and leg strengthening about 3 to 4 times per week, and I wouldn't overdo it by playing too much basketball or other activities. I followed a program that was targeted around my weaknesses, and I'll walk you through that program today. So one of the first questions I had to ask myself when designing a treatment plan was, what hurts for me? And for me, I had pain when I was jumping, especially when I was landing from the jump. I also had pain when I was squatting heavy, when I was lunging, when I was going downstairs. I had pain with lateral movements, like playing defense in basketball or lateral lunges. And I also had a lot of pain when I was running and I was slowing down, when I was cutting and changing directions. And all these painful movements highlighted that I had eccentric muscle weakness in my quadriceps muscles or my knee extensors. And I avoided loading my quads in any exercises I performed in the gym. So in order to treat it, I had to regress a lot of my exercises and rebuild my form and technique in order to properly load my quads when I was performing leg exercises. And all this was happening during COVID, so I didn't really have a ton of equipment available to do that. So here I tried to recreate what my movement assessment would look like. So here's my squat form, where I'd point my toes outward to load different parts of my lower body rather than my knee extensors. This more loaded my hip adductors and my glutes. Here's my step down form. I really had trouble basically having stability on one leg, and anytime my tibia would translate anteriorly, getting that closed chain dorsiflexion, which would load my quads more. Here's what I'd look like when I was jumping. Oftentimes I would lean to the left, loading my left side more. I was a one-footed jumper, especially jumping off my left foot as a right-handed basketball player. And I was also in the chronic stage of healing after dealing with this injury for 5 years. And I primarily had pain during activity. So rule number one when I was designing my treatment plan was to load the quads eccentrically to build that eccentric muscle strength. You have 3 types of muscle actions, which number 1 is concentric, which is when the muscle contracts and it shortens. You also have isometric, which is when the muscle is contracting, but it's staying the same length. And then you have eccentric muscle actions, which is when the muscle is lengthening under load. So I really wanted to focus on that eccentric muscle strength. Exercises I did included lateral step downs, anterior step downs, heel elevated squats, single leg sit to stands, other forms of a single leg squat or lunge. But I really focused on controlling the lowering portion of the exercise, controlling that eccentric. I also included some isometrics early on for managing pain. I really wanted to develop eccentric muscle strength throughout the full range of motion in the knee. So I used the anterior step down to really master that slight knee bend position, that athletic position, especially when that knee starts to move over the toe. And then I used the heel elevated squat to master the full knee bend position and develop strength at that deep squat position. After that foundation was set, I progressed each of the movements. So for the step down, I would increase the step height. For the heel elevated squats, I would add sets and reps, and then I would add weight to it. And then over time, I started adding in other exercises, especially single leg exercises like step ups and lunges to develop that single leg strength and really address the strength deficits in my right leg compared to my left leg. So after the first 2 months of building that foundational strength, I started to move out of the sagittal plane and into like the frontal plane and the transverse plane, which is including some lateral movements and some rotational movements. And in this time, I also added in some jumping as well, lower level jumping primarily. But that's just because I wanted to play basketball again and I wanted to get back to jumping. If you're dealing with patellar tendonitis and you don't want to get back to jumping, then this part of the treatment plan may not be necessary for you. I played a lot of sand volleyball, which was a great way to introduce 2-foot jumping on a soft surface. You know, it wasn't necessary, but it was a fun way to introduce that lower level jumping. And at the end of month 3, I started to progress the plyometrics. I stuck with the resistance training and I could really tell a difference in my quad size. And those exercises were feeling good. I started introducing more basketball movements. You know, I'd practice depth jumps off 2 feet, landings off of 1. Then I practiced different 2-legged and 1-legged jumps. I did them in the gym on the hardwood, then progressed to harder surfaces like concrete outside. And then I introduced lateral shuffling, you know, backwards shuffling, spinning movements, Euro step movements, agility drills to work on change of direction and slowing down and speeding up. It looked funny, but it worked, you know. The slower I could perform the eccentric, the more control I had. And by the end of month 4, I was feeling 100%. During this rehab time, I had to monitor my symptoms. My pain was only with activity and it was never at rest. And because I was dealing with it for 5 years, I was also in the chronic stage of healing. So because I'm in that stage of healing, I allowed myself to work through a little bit of pain when I was performing the exercises, but I tried to keep it below a 5 out of 10 on that pain scale. Anytime I had a flare-up, I would either reduce the intensity of the exercise or the volume of the exercise performed. To reduce the intensity of the strength training, you could reduce the weight, reduce the range of motion of the exercise performed. If you're using a step, you can decrease the height of the step. To reduce the intensity of the plyometrics and agility work, you can include a softer landing surface. Instead of performing a 1-legged jump, you could do a 2-legged jump. Decrease the depth jump height. decrease your jump height, decrease the force production. You can also introduce low intensity, low impact plyometrics, etc. And to progress these, you can do the opposite if it's getting too easy. So I rarely had flare-ups from the strength training exercises, but for me, I'd get flare-ups when I would increase my plyometric or agility exercise volume. It was the impact forces and the change of direction that irritated me the most, but over time I found my Goldilocks zone, the just right amount of challenge and loading that allowed my body to adapt to it without producing a flare-up. And then over time I gradually progressed until I started feeling 100% again. So I decided it was time for me to pursue a lifelong goal of mine. When I was younger, I always told myself, man, I can't wait till I'm older and I can dunk. And then I got older and I got bigger, but I still couldn't dunk a basketball on a 10-foot hoop. So once I got my knees feeling good, I thought there was nothing really holding me back, so I started to introduce some dunk training. That included, plyometrics, weight training, and basketball. And I was doing really well with that until I added in a little bit of distance running. That was about 2 to 3 miles, once or twice a week. Once I introduced that stimulus, I started developing left knee pain in the patellar tendon. But this knee pain was different than my right knee pain from the patellar tendonitis. My right knee pain was provoked when it was in a partial knee bend position, an athletic position, similar to when you're about to jump, that partial squat. My left knee pain was more after activity, so it required more symptom interpretation afterwards, and it also was felt when it was at a full stretch, when the quad and patellar tendon were fully stretched in a deep knee bend or a deep squat position. So guess what? I had to do it all over again, except this time it was my left knee, and I also waited about 1.5 years before I committed to rehabbing it. Because I was in a competitive basketball league that played weekly, and every week I'd play. The knee would feel all right during the game, but then after, it would hurt pretty badly and it'd be flared up for about 3 to 4 days afterwards. And then it'd feel good for the next game, and then I'd play, and then I'd flare it up all over again. So it was an endless cycle like that for 1.5 years before I decided I'm going to take a session off, give myself 3 to 4 months to rehab this injury. So that's what I did. Since it was the long distance, longer duration running that caused the knee pain in the first place, I introduced that into my program later, as well as, plyometrics and basketball activities. Initially, I wanted to build a foundation of strength at that full squat and that full knee bend position when the quad and patellar tendon are loaded at its full stretch. So I did, full range of motion squats, lunges, Bulgarian split squats, step-ups, you name it, I did it, primarily at a full range of motion. After flare-ups, I decreased the intensity of the exercises I perform. So I don't perform any intensive, high-impact plyometrics. I would rather do more strengthening, and I would sometimes decrease the intensity of that depending on how much pain I was in. I would also introduce isometrics because that helped, one, manage my pain, but also improve my tendon and quad strength at that shortened range of motion. And over time, I built up my running volume, and I was gradually increasing my basketball activity and plyometrics. And now I'm at the point where I can run 4 miles without any increase in pain, and I've even played multiple 40-minute competitive basketball games without any flare-ups. If you're interested in the training program I perform to rehab both my patellar tendinopathy issues, I'm going to include a training program in the description below with a link to that. But that concludes this episode of How to Heal Yourself, Patellar Tendinopathy Edition. Let me know if you have any questions. I understand this is a nagging injury that can get really frustrating to deal with, but it's so rewarding once you're finally able to heal yourself of that issue and get back to playing the sports and activities that you love doing. The next steps for me, now that I'm feeling better, is I want to be able to dunk. So I'm going to be doing a lot more dunk training, and I'll be documenting my progress on this channel as well as my Instagram. So if you're interested in that, you can stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and let me know down in the comments below what injury you want to see me treat next.
If you don't like the way you feel that much, well, maybe you should go and heal yourself.